The tension in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was palpable as Senator Josh Hawley leaned forward into his microphone, interrupting Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett for the 6th time in less than 4 minutes. "Congresswoman, with all due respect," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive Missouri cadence tinged with growing frustration. "You're completely mischaracterizing the constitutional implications of this case law." Crockett, the freshman representative from Texas who had been invited to this rare joint House-Senate hearing on judicial appointments, paused mid-sentence. Her expression remained composed despite the repeated interruptions, but the slight tightening of her jaw betrayed her growing impatience. This cross-examination style from Hawley had been escalating throughout the morning session, with the senator seeming determined to prevent her from completing a single line of questioning with the judicial nominee seated before them. The C-SPAN cameras panned between them, capturing the visual contrast that made this confrontation particularly compelling television. Hawley, 44, with his carefully styled hair and crisp navy suit, projected the image of senatorial authority. Across the hearing room, Crockett, 42, in a bold crimson blazer, represented a new generation of legislators who had come to Washington with actual courtroom experience. In her case, over 800 trials as a criminal defense attorney in Texas. "Senator," the committee chairman interjected, "the Congresswoman has the floor. Please allow her to finish her questioning." Hawley nodded with a tight smile, but couldn't resist adding, "I just think the American people deserve accurate information about our constitutional principles, especially from members of the Judiciary Committee." The packed hearing room buzzed with tension as Crockett straightened her notes, clearly recalibrating her approach after these repeated disruptions. What happened next would stun everyone in the room and millions watching online. When Hawley interrupted for the 7th time, Crockett delivered a response so measured yet devastating that it silenced the senator completely, fundamentally altered the power dynamic of the hearing, and created one of the most viral political moments of the year. Before we dive into exactly what Crockett said that left Hawley speechless, and how this confrontation has reshaped the conversation around judicial confirmations, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our coverage of Washington's most explosive political showdowns. This is the breakdown you've been waiting for. The Hart Senate Office Building's largest hearing room had been selected for this unusual joint session between members of the Senate and House Judiciary Committees. Massive marble columns lined the walls, and the elevated dais where committee members sat formed an imposing semicircle. American flags stood at attention behind the chairman's seat, while bright television lights illuminated the proceedings for the millions watching at home. Senator Josh Hawley occupied a prominent position on the Republican side of the dais. Since his election to the Senate in 2018, Hawley had built his reputation as one of the chamber's most aggressive questioners and a favorite of conservative media. With his background as Missouri's former attorney general and a Yale Law School graduate, Hawley approached hearings with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling the narrative. His precise questioning and flair for creating viral moments had made him a rising star in his party and a feared opponent in committee hearings. Today's joint hearing concerned the nomination of Judge Elena Richardson to the influential D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, often considered the second most powerful court in the nation and a stepping stone to the Supreme Court. Richardson, a former public defender with 12 years on the federal bench, had compiled a record that legal observers described as moderate, but with a strong emphasis on civil liberties. Her nomination had become a flashpoint in the ongoing battle over the judiciary, with Democrats praising her diverse experience and Republicans questioning her approach to criminal justice issues. Across the room sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, representing a striking contrast to Hawley in both style and substance. The freshman congresswoman from Texas's 30th District had quickly established herself as one of the most effective members of the House Judiciary Committee. Before winning her seat, Crockett had built an impressive career as a criminal defense attorney, personally trying hundreds of cases in state and federal courts throughout Texas. Her background gave her a practical understanding of the justice system that many legislators with purely political or corporate law backgrounds lacked. While Hawley's questioning style was performative and often designed for viral clips, Crockett's approach was methodical and rooted in courtroom experience. She typically asked precise, substantive questions, that revealed her deep understanding of legal principles and precedents. This fundamental difference in their approaches had already created tension in previous joint hearings, but today's confrontation had been building toward a breaking point. The contrast between them extended beyond their professional backgrounds. Hawley represented the traditional power structure of the Senate, Yale-educated, connected to elite conservative legal circles, and skilled in the theatrical aspects of political performance. Crockett embodied the changing face of Congress, bringing perspectives shaped by representing everyday Americans in courtrooms rather than corporations in boardrooms, and approaching hearings as a search for information rather than opportunities for sound bites. Their clash had been brewing throughout the morning session. Hawley had repeatedly spoken over Crockett during her questioning periods, inserted comments when it wasn't his turn, and exchanged knowing glances with Republican colleagues whenever she spoke. For her part, Crockett had maintained her composure, focusing on substantive questions about Judge Richardson's judicial philosophy and approach to constitutional interpretation. The breaking point came during Crockett's questioning about a controversial Fourth Amendment case that Richardson had decided 3 years earlier. The case, United States v. Martinez, had involved the question of whether police needed a warrant to access cell phone location data that had been shared with third-party apps. Judge Richardson, Crockett began, in your Martinez decision, you wrote that the third-party doctrine must evolve to reflect technological realities of modern life. Could you expand on how you believe courts should balance Fourth Amendment protections with the practical realities of digital information sharing? It was a substantive question about an important constitutional issue. Richardson had just begun to answer when Hawley's voice cut through the room. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The Congresswoman is mischaracterizing the Martinez decision. The opinion actually states that the third-party doctrine may need to evolve, not must evolve. That's a critical distinction. The chairman looked annoyed at the interruption but nodded. The record will reflect the correct quotation. Please continue, Judge Richardson. As Richardson attempted to resume her answer, Hawley interrupted again. And I'd like to add that the Martinez decision explicitly cited conservative jurisprudence in its reasoning, which the Congresswoman's question seems to ignore. This pattern continued through Crockett's entire questioning period. Each time she attempted to explore Richardson's judicial philosophy or approach to constitutional interpretation, Hawley would interrupt with a correction or clarification that seemed designed to throw her off balance and prevent a substantive discussion from developing. By the sixth interruption, Crockett's patience was clearly wearing thin, though her expression remained professionally composed. Hawley's repeated interventions had disrupted the flow of the hearing and prevented Richardson from fully answering important questions about her judicial approach. Congresswoman, with all due respect, Hawley said during this sixth interruption, you're completely mischaracterizing the constitutional implications of this case law. After the chairman again reminded Hawley that Crockett had the floor, the senator added his dig about accurate information about constitutional principles. The implication that Crockett, with her extensive trial experience, didn't understand constitutional basics was both condescending and ironic. The room grew quiet as Crockett paused, clearly, considering how to respond to these repeated provocations. Those familiar with her courtroom career recognized the look. It was the expression she wore when preparing to spring a carefully laid trap on a hostile witness. Judge Richardson, Crockett continued, deliberately redirecting attention to the nominee, in Martinez, you distinguished between voluntary and involuntary disclosure of data to third parties. Could you elaborate on where you believe that constitutional line should be drawn? Richardson had barely begun her response when Hawley's voice cut through the room for the seventh time. Mr. Chairman, I must object again. The Congresswoman continues to misrepresent judicial precedent. There is no established constitutional line between voluntary and involuntary disclosures, as she suggests. This is precisely the kind of legal inaccuracy that confuses the public about our Constitution. It was this seventh interruption, with its condescending suggestion that Crockett was confused about constitutional law, that finally prompted her response. What followed would become one of the most viewed political exchanges of the year. Crockett turned slightly to face Hawley directly, her expression calm but resolute. Senator Hawley, she began, her voice measured and clear, This is now the 7th time you've interrupted my questioning. I've been patient, but I feel I must address this pattern." The room fell completely silent. Even the usually restless press corps stopped typing as they sensed a significant moment developing. "Before I was elected to Congress," Crockett continued, "I personally tried over 800 cases in state and federal courts. I've litigated Fourth Amendment issues extensively, including digital privacy cases similar to Martinez. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, I'm actually quite familiar with the constitutional principles at issue here." She paused briefly, allowing this context to register with everyone in the room. Then, with the precision of an experienced trial attorney, she delivered the line that would instantly go viral. "Senator, the difference between us is that I've actually defended the Constitution in courtrooms while you were running away from it in hallways." The reference was unmistakable, a callback to the infamous image of Hawley running through the Capitol hallways on January 6th after having raised his fist in solidarity with protesters earlier that day. The photograph had become one of the most recognizable images from that chaotic day, following Hawley throughout his political career despite his efforts to move beyond it. The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Democratic members fought to conceal smiles while their Republican colleagues sat frozen, unsure how to respond to this unexpected counterattack. Hawley himself appeared completely stunned, his face flushing red as cameras captured his reaction in real time. But what made Crockett's response so effective wasn't just the reference to January 6th. It was her next move, which demonstrated the difference between political theater and substantive questioning. Without waiting for Hawley's response or dwelling on the moment she had created, Crockett immediately pivoted back to Judge Richardson, now judge, returning to the question of digital privacy and the Fourth Amendment. She continued her substantive line of questioning as if the interruption had never happened, demonstrating that her priority was the judicial confirmation process, not creating viral moments at the expense of the committee's work. This strategic pivot, landing a devastating counterpunch and then immediately returning to substance, showcased the difference between a legislator focused on performance and one focused on purpose. The chairman, recognizing the significance of what had just occurred, made no attempt to intervene. Hawley, for his part, sat back in his chair and remained uncharacteristically silent for the remainder of Crockett's questioning time. The power dynamic of the hearing had shifted dramatically in a single moment, and everyone in the room knew it. As Crockett concluded her questioning period, yielding the remainder of her time to the chairman, the political world was already exploding with reactions to what would soon become known simply as the hallway line. What had begun as an attempt to undermine a freshman representative had instead become a defining moment in Hawley's career, though not the kind he would have chosen. Within minutes, clips of the exchange between Crockett and Hawley exploded across social media. The hashtags Crockett Clapback and Hallway Hawley began trending nationwide. The moment when Hawley's expression changed from smug confidence to shocked silence was replayed millions of times across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. "This is what happens when you interrupt someone who has actual courtroom experience," tweeted a former federal prosecutor with over 500,000 followers. Representative Crockett demonstrated the difference between performing constitutional values and actually defending them in real cases. That distinction matters. Political analysts across networks struggle to recall a more effective counterpunch in recent congressional history. What makes this exchange so remarkable isn't just the content of Crockett's response, explained a CNN political analyst. It's how she immediately returned to substantive questioning afterward. She didn't grandstand or celebrate her viral moment. That contrast between her approach and Hawley's performative interruptions couldn't be clearer. The professional legal community weighed in heavily. The American Bar Association shared a carefully neutral statement emphasizing the valuable perspective that practicing attorneys bring to the legislative process, particularly in matters of judicial confirmation. Law school professors began sharing the clip as an example of effective responses to hostile interruptions in legal settings. Representative Crockett demonstrated a classic trial attorney technique, noted a law professor from Georgetown University. When faced with a hostile opposing counsel, address the pattern of behavior directly, deliver one precise counterpoint, then immediately return to your substantive argument. It's exactly what we teach in advanced trial advocacy. For Hawley, the aftermath was challenging. What he had intended as a demonstration of his constitutional expertise had instead exposed him to his most vulnerable political moment. Cable news programs ran side-by-side comparisons of the January 6th footage, with his stunned reaction to Crockett's comment. Late-night comedians incorporated the moment into their monologues, with one joking, "Hawley has now set the world record for fastest retreat in both the Capitol hallways and Senate hearing rooms." Hawley's initial response made matters worse. In a Fox News interview that evening, he dismissed Crockett's comment as a cheap shot that avoids the substantive constitutional issues. This characterization rang hollow, given that he had been the one repeatedly interrupting her attempts to discuss those very issues. When the interviewer pointed out this contradiction, Hawley appeared visibly frustrated, creating another awkward moment that extended the story's news cycle. After 2 days of continuing coverage, Hawley's office issued a more measured statement. "While I stand by my concerns about the characterization of certain constitutional principles during the hearing, I respect Representative Crockett's experience as a trial attorney. Our exchanges should remain focused on the substantive issues before the committee." Sources close to Hawley revealed that senior party leadership had encouraged this more conciliatory approach, concerned that his initial defensive reaction was extending the story's lifespan and damaging both his image and the party's messaging on judicial nominations. The senator, known for his ambition and media savvy, had reportedly been stunned by how quickly the exchange had spun beyond his control. For Crockett, the aftermath brought new national attention. Major news networks that had previously given limited coverage to the freshman representative now sought exclusive interviews. Sunday morning political shows, typically dominated by senators and senior representatives, extended invitations to hear her perspective on judicial nominations and congressional oversight. On Face the Nation, the host asked, "Representative Crockett, your exchange with Senator Hawley has now been viewed more than 20 million times. Many have commented on the effectiveness of your response to his repeated interruptions. Did you anticipate your comment would resonate so widely?" Crockett's answer emphasized substance over spectacle. "I didn't prepare that response to create a viral moment. I responded to a pattern of behavior that was preventing a substantive discussion about important constitutional issues. What matters isn't my exchange with Senator Hawley. It's ensuring that judicial nominees like Judge Richardson receive fair and thorough hearings focused on their qualifications and judicial philosophy." She continued, "What I believe resonated with people wasn't just my reference to January 6th. It was the contrast between interrupting substantive questions versus actually engaging with constitutional principles. As someone who has defended constitutional rights in actual courtrooms, I believe the American people deserve representatives who prioritize substance over performance." This response further enhanced her growing reputation as a serious legislator focused on governance rather than grandstanding. Her office reported being flooded with messages of support, including many from attorneys who appreciated seeing practical legal experience valued in congressional hearings. The political implications spread beyond the two individuals involved. Democratic leadership, recognizing Crockett's effectiveness, began featuring her more prominently in judicial nomination hearings. Committee chairs who had previously overlooked the freshman representative now sought her input on questioning strategy and judicial vetting. "The day after the hearing, my phone wouldn't stop ringing," a senior Crockett staffer told Politico. Members who had barely acknowledged her existence were suddenly asking if she could help prepare questions for upcoming confirmation hearings. Her stock in Congress rose more in 24 hours than most members see in their first term. Republican strategists privately worried about the broader implications. A leaked memo from a conservative advocacy group warned, "The Crockett-Hawley exchange highlights a vulnerability in our approach to these hearings. The contrast between theoretical constitutional arguments and practical legal experience can create damaging optics if our members appear to be performing rather than engaging substantively. We should prioritize members with actual courtroom experience for judicial hearings whenever possible." 3 days after the hearing, Crockett's office released a detailed analysis of Judge Richardson's judicial record, focusing on her Fourth Amendment jurisprudence and approach to digital privacy issues, the very topics she had been attempting to discuss before Hawley's interruptions. The paper cited specific cases and legal principles, demonstrating Crockett's substantial understanding of the constitutional issues at stake. "This is what serious legislators do," noted her chief of staff. "They don't just create moments. They follow through with substantive contributions to the policy conversation." Law schools took particular note of the exchange. Harvard Law School announced it would include the Crockett-Hawley interaction in its course on professional conduct and courtroom decorum. A professor explained, "This 5-minute clip encapsulates important lessons about handling hostile interruptions effectively while maintaining professional composure. It's a perfect teaching tool for aspiring trial attorneys." For everyday Americans watching the fallout, the exchange offered a satisfying moment of substance triumphing over style. Comment sections across platforms were filled with variations of, "Finally, someone who knows what they're talking about stood up to the grandstanding." What resonated with viewers wasn't just the clever comeback, explained a media analyst. It was seeing someone methodically continue their substantive work after delivering it. In a political landscape often dominated by performance rather than purpose, Crockett's approach felt refreshingly focused on the actual job of governance. 2 weeks later, when Hawley returned to another Judiciary Committee hearing, observers noted a marked change in his approach. The senator, once known for his aggressive interruptions and performative questioning, now asked more substantive questions and actually allowed witnesses to complete their answers. Whether this represented a genuine shift or simply a tactical adjustment after being burned, the contrast was notable. Meanwhile, Crockett's political trajectory continued upward. House leadership appointed her to lead a special working group on judicial nomination strategy, an unusual honor for a freshman representative. The message was clear. Her effectiveness had been noted and rewarded. What makes Representative Crockett dangerous to opponents isn't just her quick thinking. It's her substantive knowledge, explained a political strategist. She doesn't just deliver good lines, she knows the law. That combination is unfortunately rare in today's Congress. The exchange became a case study in effective congressional communication, with Crockett's approach being studied by representatives from both parties. A senior congressional staffer admitted to The Hill, "Love or hate her politics. What Crockett did was textbook perfect. She addressed the pattern of interruptions directly, delivered one precise counterpunch, and then immediately returned to substance. We're already showing the tape to our members as a how-to guide for committee hearings." Perhaps most importantly, the confrontation helped shift public attention back to Judge Richardson's qualifications and judicial philosophy. In the weeks following the hearing, media coverage increasingly focused on substantive analysis of Richardson's record rather than political theater. The judge was eventually confirmed with bipartisan support, with several Republican senators specifically citing her thoughtful answers to Crockett's questions as influencing their votes. 6 months later, as Crockett delivered the keynote address at her alma mater's law school graduation, another sign of her elevated status, she reflected on the viral moment that had catapulted her into the national spotlight. The exchange wasn't about creating a viral moment or embarrassing a colleague, she told the audience of graduating law students. It was about ensuring that our confirmation process focuses on substance rather than spectacle. As attorneys, your job will be to cut through distraction and focus on what matters, the facts, the law, and justice for those you represent. She continued, "In Washington, as in courtrooms, there will always be those who mistake volume for substance and interruption for argument. Your job as advocates for justice is to calmly redirect attention to what actually matters. That's not just good strategy. It's our responsibility as defenders of the Constitution and our legal system." The standing ovation that followed suggested her message had resonated far beyond that congressional hearing room, offering perhaps a model for how substantive expertise might occasionally triumph over political performance in an era often dominated by the latter. For Hawley, the hallway line became an unwelcome addition to his political narrative, a moment when his carefully cultivated image as a constitutional defender collided with his most vulnerable political liability. Though he continued his rise within Republican politics, the exchange with Crockett served as a reminder of the risks of prioritizing performance over substance, especially when facing opponents with genuine expertise. The Judiciary Committee itself implemented a subtle but significant procedural change in the wake of the confrontation. The chairman instituted a no interruption rule during questioning periods, with members required to wait until their own allotted time to respond to points raised by colleagues. This simple reform, directly inspired by the Hawley-Crockett exchange, helped restore a measure of decorum and substantive focus to the confirmation process. In the final analysis, what made the hallway line so compelling wasn't just the clever reference to January 6th or Hawley's stunned reaction. It was the contrast between two fundamentally different approaches to governance and constitutional oversight. One prioritizing performance and political theater, the other grounded in practical legal experience and substantive engagement. In that moment of contrast, millions of Americans glimpsed a vision of what congressional hearings might look like if substance occasionally triumphed over spectacle. If you found this breakdown of the Hawley-Crockett confrontation eye-opening, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth political analysis. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest coverage of Washington's most dramatic showdowns. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you think Congress benefits from having more members with practical courtroom experience? See you in our next video.